and are gonna talk to us tonight all about campaigns. So welcome, Z. And again, if y'all want to keep introing yourselves in the chat, feel free. You can share your name, your gender pronouns, what neighborhood you live in. My name's Jess. I'm part of the SURJ Basebuilding team. I use she, her pronouns, and I live in Old Louisville. So with that, I will pass it to Z. Thanks, y'all.
All right. Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Yes, nice to see you virtually here. Z, they, them, there. Yeah, I'm here in Louisville, and I'm the SURJ National Network Director, like Jess said. Thank you, Jess. It's so good to see you all. And I'm a big fan of SURJ. I've participated in some of the door knocking. Hello? Yeah, I've done some of the door knocking and I've attended some actions. And just so you know, the SURJ chapter is a star chapter among chapters around the country. So you should be very excited about being part of the chapter. And yeah, lots of great stuff happening. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit about campaigns tonight. And I've done a lot of work in Madison, Wisconsin, is where I did a lot of local organizing with the local SURJ chapter and some other organizations there. And I love doing campaign work. And so I'm going to share some slides and ask for you all to help me with reading some of the slides. So you can unmute yourself and read when I ask for a volunteer. Can you see that okay? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so let's get into it. So first we have a very basic definition of campaign. So can someone read that definition?
Hey, I can start. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Cool.
Thanks.
A campaign is your plan to get your folks and your friends to force a decision maker to give you what you want.
All right, awesome. Thank you. So we'll talk a little bit more about this later. And this is like, you know, a very narrow definition. There's a lot of different ways that people think about campaigns, but this is really gets at some of the root pieces of a campaign. And so this is the folks that we're talking about. This is the base building group. And when we're talking about folks, we're talking about our base. So the people who we want to engage, the people in our lives who we're doing outreach to, who we're connecting, who we're bringing into the work. And so those are some of the folks in our community. And our friends, they're actually talking about like ally organizations. So other partner organizations that are doing similar work or important, powerful people that are doing that we want to work with. And we're working to force a decision maker. So someone like a mayor or a city council person or the CEO of a corporation to give us what we want, which is more justice, more racial justice, policy changes, budget changes, all those things. So could someone read this slide?
A good campaign is widely, deeply felt, brings meaningful change to people's lives, is measurable, alters power relationships, and gives people a sense of their power, creates leadership development opportunities and avenues to new leadership, has a clear target with a name, builds toward justice, not just us, is winnable.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so there's a lot here. You know, we're going through this pretty quickly, and a lot of this stuff we could talk about for a long time. But you can put questions in the chat, or you know, come off of mute and say, "Hey, can we talk more about this?" Again, we're going to have some small group discussion towards the end, so you'll be able to get to talk a little bit with folks about this, and this will be an ongoing conversation in future meetings too. But yeah, so these are some key parts of a campaign and what makes a good campaign. So just to clarify, sometimes the one that is sometimes confusing, builds towards justice, not just us. So we're trying to get a victory, but it's also shifting towards justice. So it's not just this something that's going to be beneficial just for me or just for a small group of people, but it's really, like the one that talks about shifting power relationships. It's shifting those power relationships and working towards overall racial justice. So that one is sometimes confusing. Great. So we're going to, just if you want to put in the chat or unmute yourself and say, Jess mentioned a few campaigns, but what are some other campaigns that either you've been a part of or that you've heard about in history, or other local campaigns that you know about? So can you put a few in the chat or unmute yourself and tell me just briefly what it is? What comes to mind?
AZ, I'll mention the efforts to stop the Keystone XL pipeline.
Yeah, awesome. That's a great one. Stop the pipeline that would be polluting the lands and taking indigenous lands. Yes, awesome.
The campaign in Louisville in 2017 to to get Metro Council to enforce a firewall between the police and ICE.
Oh, wonderful. Yes, awesome. Thank you for that. Yes, fairness campaign for LGBTQ equity. Clout campaigns for affordable housing. Ending cash bail campaign. Getting SROs out of schools. Yes, which is a really great.
What about something like removal of the Castleman statue? Would that be a campaign? I don't know if it was widely and deeply felt.
Yes, I think it was. Yeah, I think throughout the city, especially, and even around the country, actually, a lot of people felt that. And I know SURJ did a lot of great work to make that happen. Poor People's Campaign to change the moral narrative. Yes. Stopping the methane plant. Avertive practices in JCPS schools. Yes, these are awesome. Ending mass incarceration. Coalition of Immokalee workers, tomato pickers. Yeah, they won some really great wage increases and other worker right reforms. Close the School of Americas, voter enfranchisement. Yes, awesome. These are so great. Thank you all. Yeah, feel free to keep putting them in the chat. And we often, there's a lot that we remember based on what we win, but a lot of these campaigns, are very ongoing and take a long time. So it can take a week, or it can take a month, or 5 years, or 10 years, or 15 years. So, all right. So I'm going to move to the next slide here. So just two areas that we wanted to highlight. Yeah, just one real quick, the Charles Booker campaign. So just thinking also about electoral campaigns. So that's another type of campaign that is a campaign. And this kind of like cycle doesn't focus as much on electoral campaigns, but it is a really important part of organizing. All right, so decarceration and defund the police. So as people have mentioned, there has been a lot of work around ending cash bail. There's also Freedom Fridays. I know a lot of people participated in Freedom Fridays, car caravans, and there was a lot of people released around the state, particularly from fresh pressure from grassroots groups. And people were released from jails and prisons and detention centers for fear of COVID and the impact that COVID was having on people who are incarcerated. And yeah, the Bail Project has bailed a ton of people out. So a lot of work around decarceration that SURJ has done and will continue in some way in the future. And then defund the police or divest, invest in law enforcement is another campaign. So forcing the city council and the mayor to cut the budget of the police and reallocate funds towards other needs such as housing, healthcare, crisis response, or education. And right now there's an effort underway with Metro Watch to challenge the FOP contract, which is among the worst FOP contracts in the country. So, so 2 areas of work that have been called for from the movement, the uprising, and that SURJ has been part of and will likely be part of in some way moving forward. So I'm going to move to another handout here, another piece of information. So this is called the life cycle of an organizing campaign. So let's see. So yeah, so this is something we're going to go through and talk about these different phases. So it's a lot to take in, but I'm going to try to break it down a little bit. And we're going to start with base building and then go around to choosing an issue, community power analysis, action, decision making, and evaluation. And and these are not linear. Oftentimes we're jumping from one to the other and back to the other, doing these simultaneously. So just to keep that in mind as we're going through this. So let's go down here to the key terms. So could someone read the base building term?
Yeah, I can do that. Base building, the process of organizing people by building relationships based on shared interests. An issue is a solution.
You can
Is that
just
enough?
start with the base building one.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and then we'll go through each of them. This is the base building group. A lot of people have done different parts of base building, like knocking on people's doors, doing outreach to people at actions or events. So this is that process of figuring out who's with us and who can we bring with us, doing different community education events, and then oftentimes having one-on-one conversations with people, we call a one-on-one. And so finding ways to bring people into the work and support their leadership development and support their engagement to building power together so we can get the changes that we want. Because we don't always have the people in positions of power. We don't always have the tons and tons of money, but we have people power that we can use to get what we want and to make concrete changes in people's lives. So yes, can we have someone read about an issue?
Sure. An issue is a solution to a shared problem that has a clear target or decision maker and a demand.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, so oftentimes I think about issue and I think about the problem. So the problem being we don't have enough affordable housing, or that the police have too much money in the budget and have killed people, especially unarmed Black people. And so we need it. The issue is the solution that we have. So the issue being that we want to defund and reallocate resources to other things that we think will keep our communities more safe. So this is the solution that we're trying to get the decision maker to move on. So in the circle up here, it says this is, a democratic process. There's a clear solution to the problem. It attracts support needed to win and generates demands. So sometimes we're getting the issue from the base building. So we're going to knock on people's doors and ask them, what are the problems you're facing and what solutions do you envision to these problems? And sometimes the issue is coming out of things like the movement moments, like the uprising that we've seen. and from other partner organizations that we're working with. So sometimes we're borrowing the issues and supporting the issues that have already been developed by other people. I know I'm going fast. I know this is a lot of information to take in, and again, feel free to stop if there's something that you really want more information about. And again, we'll have more time to talk about it at the end. So power analysis. Could someone read about power analysis?
Power analysis, strategy designed to understand and build power around a particular issue in order to achieve victory.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so this is figuring out who is on our side, who are we up against, and what will it take to get us what we want. So it's developing that strategy. So it's identifying who the decision maker is, who are our allies and opponents, researching the strategy and developing tactics. So, and then the tactics we're going to use in the next phase. So tactics are things like, like phone calls, letters, rallies, press conferences, car caravans. So once we figure out who we need, who can give us what we want, who's supporting us, and who's on our side, and what it's going to take to win, then we take action. And so could someone read the action definition?
Action is the use of various tactics like phone calls, letters, rallies, press conferences, etc., by the base to put pressure on the target.
All right, awesome. Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this, but we've seen, a lot of rallies happening locally, a lot of civil disobedience happening locally, direct actions, banner drops, banners on the bridge, interrupting press conferences, holding press conferences, making phone calls, writing letters, all these things we've seen locally, and many of you all have taken part in. Oftentimes, this also helps get media attention, which then also helps put pressure on the decision maker. Could someone read the decision making?
Decision making, process of deliberation and negotiation between your base and a particular target related that leads to a final decision.
Yeah, that one's kind of worded funny, but yeah. Great. So this is sometimes, the person who's in power, the mayor or the city council member, might want to negotiate about something with the organization that's pushing for something. They might say, your demand is that we defund the police, and we will defund a particular amount, but we also want you all to support this certain thing, or we want the demand to be a little bit different than exactly how you're saying it. And then the people power, the base, has to decide what to do with that. But oftentimes there's a vote, or there's a final meeting, or there's a shareholders meeting if we're targeting a corporation or a bank, and then, or there's a final budget. So those are some of the parts, and these, the decision that is being made about is, it's the FOP contract, or it's a ordinance change, a local ordinance change, or it's a budget change, or it's creating a new program or structure. So that's what the decision is being made about. And and then if you win, you win, and it's really exciting. It's important to celebrate the victories that we have. And sometimes the win isn't the concrete change. I mean, that's what we want, but sometimes we also have to notice all the wins that we get in terms of building power and building people's leadership and building partnerships between organizations. And so that's what we do in the evaluation section. So could someone read the evaluation definition?
Evaluation, capturing lessons, tensions, and gut reactions to the outcome of a campaign. Evaluation shouldn't only happen at the end of a campaign, but constantly throughout the campaign, focusing on what went well, what to improve, and next steps.
Thank you. Yes. So again, you know, it might be that we're like, this is awesome. We've been working on this for so long. We're going to celebrate this. It might be that we didn't quite win, but we did shift things, and that next time we might win. It might be that we really built a strong community. We built a strong program, and you know, looking at like how many people got involved, how many new people took on new leadership roles, how much money did we raise for our partner organizations, or how much money did we raise for our organization. So a lot of things to reflect on, and then decide, you know, are we going to keep pushing at this? If we won something, do we need to get ready for when it's going to get, you know, potentially pushed back on? So, you know, or what are the next steps? We got police out of schools, but then are there going to be security guards that are going to be acting almost exactly like police that we need to be addressing? All of those things. Great. So just to look at this cycle again, these are all the steps. And, you know, again, this is one way of thinking about it. These are components of a campaign and don't always go in this order. And sometimes there's not as clear of a target, sometimes there is. But these are all really helpful parts of a campaign. And in reflecting on a lot of the campaigns that I've been a part of, sometimes it's not as obvious where all these different parts are, but looking back, it's like oftentimes all these components are part of the campaign process. So we're going to get into breakout groups. If there's any, you know, in the breakout groups, you're going to get a chance to, you know, talk with your fellow group members about questions that you have. Actually, I'm going to go to the next slides. Yeah, and we're going to share these slides with you. We're going to share the document with you so you can look at it more. And then the questions are, what feels most exciting or interesting to you in participating in a campaign? What concerns do you have? Barriers do you see, or information do you need? And yeah, so if there's any clarifying questions quickly before we do that, otherwise we're going to have another 10 minutes when you come back to share back what you've talked about in your small groups. Yeah. Hey, welcome back, everybody. Good to see you all. Hope you had a great time talking to your friends. And so yeah, we're gonna hear just any questions or reports that you want to share about what you talked about in your group. And one of the things that Christine just brought up, I think that's a great thing for us to talk a little bit about. If you want to, would you mind sharing that again, Christine?
I had heard that SURJ usually tries to follow the Black community's lead in whatever they're taking action on. And so I didn't hear you mention it when you were showing us and talking about the circle of the campaign. And so I'm just wondering, like, how would we ever know, like, just as people on the ground, like who's how do we know where the solution is coming from, and if it, you know, how it's gonna, if it's what the community really wants and type of thing.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Great question, and probably on other people's minds also. I could say a little bit, and then Carla or Jess should say something too. But there is close relationships with other organizations in Louisville, people of color-led organizations that SURJ has worked closely with and is in conversation with, and partners with them. And sometimes we'll take on one part of a campaign and really focuses on how to engage white people as part of that campaign. and we'll maybe come up with parts of this cycle and then be in conversation with another organization, people of color-led organization, and make sure that we're in line and that we're sharing the work together. But yeah, I don't know, Carla or Jess, if you want to say more about what that's looked like for SURJ.
Yeah, I can say real quick, some folks remember the campaign to separate the police and ICE. SURJ was very much part of that in both the schools and then the community, but it was the Latinx community, immigrant community, undocumented people who identified that of all the issues that immigrant community was struggling with, this collaboration between the police and ICE was the thing that needed to change, was the most urgent. And so SURJ did our work to move white people around that and white school board members and Metro Council people, but with the vision of separate those. We didn't decide, yeah, but we think we want to work on this other thing. It was defined by the folks who are most impacted.
I have nothing to add. That's a great example, Carla. Thank you.
Great. Good question. Any other questions or things that came up in your group that you all want to share about?
I'll just observe that in our group, none of us went into great detail, obviously, but it was pretty obvious that just in the three of us, each of us brought really different areas of interest and different things that like felt comfortable or felt exciting or felt natural or whatever. And that like, it's good obviously to be challenged, but it's also good to have people engage in things that excite them or make them want to be engaged. So.
Mm-hmm. Nice. That's great. Yeah, really good. Yeah. And also different roles that are needed. So whatever your skills or interests are, it's likely needed. Like there's a lot that goes into this. And if you're really interested in spreadsheets, if you're interested in like making phone calls, if you're interested in Google Docs, if you're interested in talking to people, if you're interested in, you know, locking yourself to something. So there's lots of different roles that you can play, and all are needed. So, and yeah, different interests in terms of like different types of issues that we can work on also. So thank you. Yeah, Phil?
Yeah, I'm struck with with a question and a challenge, which is that campaigns can be small and focused or larger and less focused. And it seems that this is connected maybe to what Christine was saying earlier too, or the connection she was drawing and that Carla referenced. But how does an organization identify a campaign that has enough clarity, but and how narrow that can be? Around racial justice, there are just numerous campaigns going on, all interrelated, so that the invitation, I guess, to an organization is to go through a process that helps identify the scope and focus of a particular campaign, knowing that it fits into larger movement building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that would be great to talk about movement building also in a future meeting maybe. But yeah, I mean, I would say, and then again, if other folks want to add, but yeah, what is the capacity that we have? What is the like political landscape? What is like, what could we possibly win? How would it affect the community? What is the community saying? You know, what seems to be rising to the top? And of course, like what are our partners on and prioritizing? And yeah, what could we really have an impact on are some of the things that I think would go into that. Yeah, anything to add? Okay.
I think something I just thought of that I'll throw out there is when SURJ is thinking about campaigns or partnerships, there's something to think about is like what would it mean to mobilize white people around this issue, and can white people be a kind of tipping point? An example that I think of is the elections in Georgia. I'm thinking about all the different voting blocks in that state, and every single voting block, the election was so close that like any of them kind of tipped the scale, right? And so something the National SURJ did for the general and is continuing to do for the Senate runoffs is calling white voters and kind of picking up that piece in partnership with Black-led voting rights groups who are on the ground in Georgia. So there's something, I don't know, just thinking strategically about where we fit into some of these issues as a group, as a multiracial group that focuses on mobilizing white folks. It's like, yeah, we're, you know, why does it matter to organize white people around this issue? Where's their mutual interest? And how can this, yeah, kind of move the needle on some stuff? So that I don't know. I just been thinking about that this week for some reason. But I love that question, Phil.
Awesome. I love that example. Yeah. What else? Other questions that people have or things you want to share? How are you feeling? Are you like, this is a terrible idea, I shouldn't have even engaged in this? Or is it like, oh, this sounds exciting, this sounds interesting?
I was just going to say, you stuck me with the three research nerds ended up in the same room. So we were all kind of figuring next steps on how do we and I wasn't clear on that answer as I should have been.
Yeah. Yeah, I love people who love to research. It's like such an important part of making a campaign go well. If you can really figure out like what's the landscape and researching the target and like the person who were the influencer, the person who we're trying to influence, you know, what interests them, who are their friends, where do they get money from, what's their phone number, or, you know, how do we contact them? You know, that's an important part. There's so many parts of a campaign that can benefit from research. And I think oftentimes laying out like, here's the situation, here's the problem, can be really important, also part of the research. And then also researching what have other people done in other places, like what solutions, what issues have people used in other places. So there's tons of things to research. That's awesome. Kelly, and then
yeah,
Nord.
I
Yeah,
was just
Kelly.
saying that, or thinking, and I shared this with my group recently for the first time. I was involved in something that they ended up bringing in an attorney to do some of the work. And I was like, this is awesome, because it had to do with, you know, contracts and things that lay people just generally don't understand, you know, or it take us 10 times as long. So I was like, oh my gosh, you know, so many times that we worked hard, we do our grassroots, we research. When I buy a car or real estate, everybody researches and does their homework. But occasionally it is nice to have an expert in the field that you're working in, you know, contribute their time or, you know, that kind of thing. So that was a first for me to work on something where we actually had a professional that could tell us what the heck that meant, you know, so that was exciting. It was fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. Yes.
I think there was some consensus in the group I was in. I think there was some consensus in the group I was in about just how clear your document made the process and how so encompassing. And I'm going to jump to a conclusion that most of us on this call have been involved in some kind of campaign because we, this is an activist organization. And so, you know, to see it in a little color wheel like that was, was kind of helpful. And, I had not seen it, like that. And just how you described that it's not linear and how, probably I would, depending on the campaign, some of those wedges, whatever, are going to come out farther, and some will recede based on, the size and the target and all of that. So it'll be interesting to use that, to implement that in a campaign. For me personally, my involvement, to see how it all, comes together.
Awesome. That's great. That's good to hear. Yeah. I feel like, yeah, Rhodey, just a second. The one thing I want to say about that is just that I've been part of a lot of campaigns, but then to like actually see it laid out like that really helps clarify some of the things that are hard to see when you're in the midst of it. But yeah, Rhodey.
Well, I was struck by kind of having to recognize the different roles that I've done and been in, from the 60s as a war protester and, creating a collective and all that stuff. And as I'm now, 76 or something like that, and find myself in COVID, I find myself changing, and I'm not out there marching. I'm doing much less, I'm not getting arrested. And part of me is thinking, well, I have gifts to give, but I'm changing what it is in a way. And I'm, am I retiring? I mean, in a way where I should say my role is changing. I see my role and responsibility.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. That's great. It's good to have your experience and for you to be here. I know, and hope that you continue being in this space. And yeah, I hope everybody does. Also, we're going to do some announcements, and it'd be great if you want to raise your hand or put like a plus sign or a 1 in the chat if you're interested in continuing talking about campaigns and continuing, learning or getting involved more. And so yes, great. And yeah, so like Carla said, this will be a space to talk more and learn more and to do some planning and to move into action. So excited to do more of that with you all. All right, yes, that's great. It's good to see these 1s and plus signs coming in. All right, and I'm gonna pass it to Jess.
Well, let's also share some love for Z for sharing their expertise and experience with us. And thank you all for sharing reflections, conversation. I wish I could have eavesdropped on everyone's breakout rooms, but yeah, y'all are terrific, and this was a really good time. So we want to wrap up in our last 8 or 9 minutes with some announcements. I think as Z said and as Carla has said, we're going to start to really use this meeting every month as a space to kind of do a mix of things, like kind of use it as a working space and not just Carla and I tell you stuff space, although we love that space too, and it's very helpful, I guess. So yeah, a little more like co-working, group conversation, breakout group kind of space. And then we'll always have announcements, ways you can get plugged in this week. So I think it's always a mix of like, oh, here's this medium to long-term thing that we're working on that you can be a part of. And then like, yeah, here's this like phone call you can make this week to the mayor or whoever. So yeah, I'm just always wanting a mix of stuff. And yeah, folks are always welcome at all levels. I think the other thing about that is what I love about what Z shared with us tonight, and I think things we'll continue to share and learn from each other about just like organizing nuts and bolts, because we can all learn how to organize and we can all learn how to do it better. I used to think that like community organizers were these other special people who had like special gifts that no one else had. And I actually still think that's true. And these things are also skills, and we all have a lot to bring to this work, and we can also all learn how to do this stuff. And I include myself in that, and I challenge myself to keep learning. So yeah, so I just want to say that.